Drink. Erroneous, how are you doing, sir?
No one calls me that.
No,
I'm good.
Lord Roan.
Yeah.
You're good. Sun's shining. Today's
Yeah.
Liberation Day in the Netherlands. We got some
Yes.
good weather.
Yeah.
So
It's
what does that
Liberation
mean?
Day, everyone. That means what is it? 79 years today that we've been liberated after World War II. So something worth celebrating.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We have a commemoration the day before.
Yeah, that's correct.
A
Yeah.
2 minute silence, even on the highways. So that's it's good, I
Yeah.
think.
It's a bit inflammatory this year because of, well, I mean, like obviously like there's a remembrance for specifically mostly I'd say the Jewish victims of the Second World War. And then obviously besides that you have all the um Dutch soldiers, but also we commemorate the atrocities of the Dutch themselves against the colonies. So it's very much centered on that, but because it's so, what do you call it? Like there's such a strong connotation with like, okay, this is for peace and for freedom, and therefore there was this huge risk where it's like, okay, we have all these protests, obviously, from pro-Palestine protesters, and obviously like protesting is totally fine. The question is like now there was a lot of tension, like, oh wait, is there going to be a protest here? So it was very strange to see that there was like all this, extra security and there were way fewer people than usual. Kind of didn't really feel right how it happened this year, but on the other hand, it's difficult to see how it could have happened differently. So yeah, it's a bit strange, but other than that, happy Liberation Day.
Damn, man, you're a philosopher. That was
Why?
wild.
That was just relating the news,
I
actualities.
didn't even know all this. I didn't even stuck in my
Oh.
head once. I was just happy to be in the sun. Wow. That's great though. That's the mind I'm dealing with. That's good. Makes me aware. But you had a plan for today. Let's talk about the plan.
Yeah, so
What you want to start with?
I should be a familiar guest by now. And it's kind of also interesting because sometimes, like I still teach philosophy at Utrecht, and every now and then I have a student coming up to me saying he found my conversations with you, which is kind of like a
Ah,
bit like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about that,
it's
but I
like I
guess
saw you naked on the beach.
like there's something weird about that. But at the same time, you kind of know that that's sort of like what do you call it? Like the deal you're signing with this
Yeah.
publication. Um, but therefore, I'm well aware that the light has been like centrally aimed at me since you were been the interviewer and I've been the interviewee, and I think we should turn it around, but only experimentally, because it might be that, like your usual interviews goes, that we start off with an interview and it ends up becoming like a conversation, and who knows, maybe a dialectic into dialogos. But I have some questions, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm really interested with, it's so funny because like you're one of the youngest people in this little corner. It's actually like I don't think like we have people in their late 20s like myself. And it's interesting, we have people mostly I think like early 30s, but then like there's 40s, 50s. There's actually very few teenagers. It's like it's kind of funny. It's like the teenagers are all into Jordan Peterson, and then at some point, and so that's also why he serves a purpose, so it's fine. Um, and then at some point, the teenagers they grow up and they start thinking beyond uh their own self-improvement and towards community building, which actually obviously relates to self-improvement. And it's kind of interesting because you're a young guy getting married very soon. You obviously you have a different mindset than most people your age, that you're like determined to do certain things, which is also why you've been interested on, let's say, the wisdom front, to not capitalize in the wrong way, it seems, on, let's say, the successes you've obtained so far with your channel, which obviously like the successes, I just mean like, for instance, like the great guests you've had, and more interest than you had at the start in your channel, and talking to DC Schindler, John Vervaeke, Robert Breedlove, um, Kurt Jaimungal. So like these are all very interesting individuals. But at the same time, like there's something interesting happening because you've also talked to me and to Christian Baxter, and there's obviously other people. And the interesting tension there is that me and Christian Baxter, like we watch some of your other videos, you know, like so it's like it's reciprocal and we build community. Whereas obviously with these larger individuals, you interview them and that's it, and they're out of your life, and it's like and when then we talk about them, but obviously they rarely reciprocate, and I don't blame them because they can't, right? Like they have too many people who are interested in them. So I want to hear once more, like, what do you think the role should be of these, let's say, what do you call it, high status conversations and interviews, as you've had a couple? And do you say you are happy you had them? Do you regret having them? Do you want to maybe intermittently do them? Like, how do you sort of look at that as a part of your channel? And how has it also transformed you individually, if at all?
Thank you. It's a great question. A lot of background. So I do not regret any of the conversations I've done on this channel. I absolutely don't. I do think that the big names were in succession, and I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of afraid that that might have created a wrong expectation of this channel, because I do want to limit those interviews, like you say, intermittent,
Mm-hmm.
for example. I think that they serve a purpose and they serve a role, but it's not a central role. I really would like to expand a lot more this channel into different directions. Um, Speaking with people that are much different and people that are much smaller or people that completely think very differently. And so
Mm-hmm.
these talks were great. Like I loved every one of them, and some of them I still think about every day. I will say, not to play favorites, but who did I have on? Like Kurt, David, Robert. What did you say? Paul,
Done.
John. Yeah. So Kurt and David, they both left like a really lasting mark on me and my thinking, where I think about some of the things they say still to this day, like every day. Um, Kurt more in the personal front, in the sense that he has these policies that
Mm-hmm.
have been very effective for me, like distrusting yourself and trusting others. That has been very key for me in the last couple of weeks, months. And David, wow, like David, the way he enters a conversation. He recently spoke with Robert, actually. You know, they had a beautiful
David is D.T.
conversation.
Schindler, for those who don't know.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a talk with Robert, and he entered into the same mind state. It's so beautiful. Um,
Mm.
and I mean, each and every one of my guests has an impact on me, but I was really surprised with how much attention and care they gave into that conversation. And of course, Paul does that as well, but you're just so used to it from Paul because he's like a father, you know, like he's just
Yeah.
always himself with anyone, and he's already shown and proven that with like his Rando's conversation, that he's just
Yeah.
himself. So that's really beautiful. But these bigger conversations, quote unquote, um, they serve a smaller role in this channel, and I hope that they don't become central. If
Mm-hmm.
they do, people watching now, maybe they watch this in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good sign. Talk to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of
It's
like
not the direction I want to take this channel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's what do you call it? Like that's also the thing about Paul, you know, like he every now and then he does interview a high status individual, but it's not like for every of his other videos, people are like, when are you gonna finally interview someone famous again or something like that? They're not like that. So it's clearly not central in his even though like yeah, those things get more views. It's clear that it's not about that. So like if you're
Yeah.
just gonna go by the views, then it's like, oh, my channel should be doing this. But if you go by the comments and therefore like let's say something close to the community, it's interesting that it should point elsewhere. But I totally like I'm happy to hear you don't regret them, because some of those conversations, well, I think actually maybe all of them in their own way were like absolute gems. And yeah, I really, really appreciate like also just to see sort of like Kurt was sort of struggling out loud in a very like what do you call it, like it was just very admirable to see him do that, you know, like to be like, okay, I'm at this moment I'm struggling. And I I really enjoyed your conversation with I think the YouTube channel name is G.P
Oh
Xavier, right?
yes, this
Yeah,
is like one of
yeah,
my all-time favorite conversations. I need to
yeah.
have him on again.
Yeah, it's kind of
But
funny. Like he now interviewed us both, which is really
he,
like
yes, yes, please, I'll put it in the description. Put Aaron's talk in the description. He interviewed Aaron. It's such in detail questions. It's so awesome. But
yeah,
if you're
it-
listening,
mhm,
like we need to talk again. And
yeah.
my fiance might have been her favorite conversation on this channel. She listened to it. She loved it so
Oh,
much.
yeah,
Not even so much about what we said, but the way he presented himself. So
yeah,
good, humble, open. So yeah,
yeah. He was fantastic, and I also like. Unfortunately, like I've had such like a busy time um working through that over the past few months, and right now things are opening up again, but he is working on this whole other project. Like he has a blog, and then he presents the blog in his videos, and he has like hour-long conversation with a really good conversation partner that I started but I haven't been able to finish yet. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into that, and then maybe talking to him again. But I thought what was funny about that was like he also reflected on exactly the thing that I thought was equally funny, that Kurt said, "What grounds me? Maybe math." Mathematics. You know
mathematics.
that, yeah, maybe
So
that's the thing
funny.
that grounds me. And at the same time also understanding where he's coming from. Like, okay, I can see how that, like, that gives you some stability. Like there's something,
Yeah,
stable and eternal, like in the Platonic forms kind of.
exactly.
But to say that it grounds you, like it's such an interesting thing. Um yeah, and what do you call it? Like what I also really appreciated about him, and something that I want to discuss with him, and I think I shared it in the comments. He might have responded, and Busy Me might have not responded back. So if you're listening, I'm sorry. I'll try to get back to it. But like you talked about the afterlife, and that's really the type of, like there are some questions that I'm not sure if, yeah, scare me. That's maybe the wrong word, but that I'm very careful with, simply because I'm aware, like how I started off this conversation is like, sometimes my students, they find this, and I it's not even that I'm like that I want that I'm afraid that they, what do you call it, like know that I think about those things, but I don't want them to confuse my speculations on certain topics with my philosophical positions on something. And as a teacher, that's also different, because as a teacher, you're supposed to teach on everything, like you're not really supposed to take in like a hardcore strong stance. Like if I teach, doesn't really matter, if I teach libertarianism or Marxism, I'm gonna like show that really I'm gonna be charitable. Let me put it that way. Even though I'm also gonna point out the flaws, and that makes it, I think, very tough for me to speculate about those things for which it's very difficult to take in like a very clean philosophical position that is not itself very controversial. So I'm curious, like you don't carry that weight specifically, but do you feel like there was something about you discussing it because you were already like being very careful, like I don't know, and I'm ready to be wrong? Like, are those subject matters that, I should say it, like somewhat scare you, or are you like happy to talk about them? Like how was that? Because you rarely discuss that kind of stuff, I think.
Oh, it was great. I loved it, especially
Okay.
because the questions were so awesome, and they opened up so many avenues where he could pitch in as well with
Mm-hmm.
his thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very careful with what I say, because not because I carry the weight you carry as a teacher, but because I'm trying to be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And being truthful in speech is not easy
Mm-hmm.
unless you're very present. And so that is the reason that it's that way. It doesn't scare me in any way, but it's an extremely meaningful and thus responsible endeavor. And so that is
Mm-hmm.
why I took great care into my answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I see. No, it was great, and it was also like he again, like he was also an amazing interviewer, which is might also be interesting, like to kind of like, be an interviewer yourself and then be interviewed in some ways,
Yeah.
and the same with Ken Lowry in a different ways, that you wanted to interview him, whereas he is usually the interviewer, or he lets other people talk.
Yeah. We'll do something on his channel also. It'll be fun.
Oh, yeah, great, yeah,
Yeah.
no,
But
that,
GP Xavier, just to speak a bit about him, I
mm,
think he should start audio podcasts as well, like
oh yeah,
to get that
yeah,
uploaded somewhere, because he doesn't have a camera, of course, and I think that does um,
mm-hmm.
influence your success on YouTube. Whereas if he starts an audio only podcast,
Yeah,
I mean, he's really got the talent for it, and if somehow he could get the numbers. He really deserves it, I think. Like, it's such
Yeah.
high quality content. I'm sad to see that there's not more eyeballs on it, or ears in this case.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much he cares about that, honestly.
I
It's
don't think
it's
he
kind of
really
like
cares.
and that's also like one of the best things probably about him, because on the one hand, he in some ways clearly does, in the sense like, look how incredibly professional his presentation is. So it's like, you just everyone is viewing right now. Just like there's going to be a link in
Yeah.
as Lucas already said. So you can go to that video or you can go to any other video, and it's just amazing if you look at the description of it. If you listen to how he phrased it. So like there's something so professional about it, and yet at the same time, he doesn't seem bound by the algorithm at all. So it's kind of very, yeah, he's a very interesting case study. And I also thought it was funny that at some point, uh, like his Australian English, that it was like, do you think that's fear? And you were like, fear? I was like, no, fear. Like, oh, fair.
Yeah, yeah.
It was also wonderful.
That was
Um,
good.
and that's, by the way, nothing against G.P Xavier, because us Dutch folks, we also sometimes have our problems with pronunciation. So there's nothing wrong with that. Um, Let me think. Like I definitely have other things that I do want to talk about. And some of it, like, it does relate a little bit to how, like, what do you think is the proper mode of participation here? Like, because like we're still trying to figure out what this little, let's say, subculture is. And so this little corner of the internet where many people like yourself, like they post their stuff online, they sometimes hop into live streams like you've done yourself, and I did that recently. Um, I also shared with you, recently I jumped into a live stream of Grill Country, and then Luke Thompson also said like he saw your video. And he was like, "Oh, he's just a great guy." It was like it's probably the name in the comments, which I thought was really funny, you know.
Yeah.
But he wants to talk to you as well. But I'm curious,
Mhm.
like, there's something about um, like how important do you think this balance should be? No, it's kind of difficult to say. Like, there's something about this community which is extremely healthy, because, like, it's like some of the best way of having a conversation ever. It's like there's all this humility, there's genuine listening. You talk about subject matters that do not just relate to some like intellectual interest, but also about your moral conduct. So like there's all these aspects of it that are really good. At the same time, there's obvious limits to it that everyone always brings up. And I still don't know how to balance that. And I was listening to the live stream on Friday from PVK, and it was also fascinating to just kind of like listen and be like, okay, it actually feels so cozy here, but at the same time, I was like just looking around, like my my fiance is currently out, like she was out in the Czech Republic, and and I was waiting for her to come back so I could pick her up from the station. So I was just kind of like sitting here by myself, but also being like in that chat room, and it was really wonderful, like to kind of be I don't know,
Yeah.
just just being with them. But it felt
Yes.
weird, I was like, but because I'm also here by myself, and at the same time, now I'm really relating to you, and that already feels different because I'm going to see you in person soon enough, and I've seen you in person soon enough. But you're also, I think, by yourself now in this room. I'm by myself in this room, and do you think that's healthy? Do you think this is like a temporary thing, or do you think it's gonna keep going this way, or do you think it's gonna move elsewhere? What are your views on that?
So when I was 15, I was always in a Twitch stream watching someone play video games, and I would interact with the community, and there would be a Discord group, and we
Mm.
basically gathered around this one individual and watching him play and discussing it, and that already felt cozy, but it was
Mm.
not good.
Oh
It
yeah,
was not
yeah.
good at
I
all.
get it.
Like I'm watching someone play video games, and
Yeah.
so there was a small good to it, but the bad outweighed the good in that sense. Then we
Mm.
fast forward to today, where we interact with each other online,
Mm.
and I think it's great, a lot of it, but I'm afraid of a lot of it because not only is it worse than being in person, it can also be a substitute for the in person. For a lot of people, that is the case. So I think it should be temporary in most people's lives, or it should take up a small space in most people's lives. I say this because it reminds me of estuary, actually, where
Mm.
for some people, estuary is like life changing and it needs to be in their lives, you know.
Yeah.
But for others, they probably should do better to go to their own church and to have their in-person interactions.
Yeah.
Um, this
Briefly,
little,
briefly, can I briefly interrupt?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just about estuary, because some folks might not be
Oh, yeah,
familiar,
yeah.
right? It's like it's the on location thing, and if you're actually curious what it is exactly, Paul Vanderklei on his channel, he just uploaded a production by Justin Wells, who's by the way going to come over to the Netherlands this week, and I think you're going to be
Oh,
visiting
yeah.
or meeting
Thursday.
him, right? He's a
Yeah,
film.
probably.
Yeah, and I'm also hoping to meet him, but yeah, unfortunately, like I have some other plans. But yeah, the great thing about that is like it's really these types of conversation, but much more in person and much more also on like it really has to start off with the personal. It's just like you start off with like, hey, how's everyone been doing since last time? What's been happening in your life? And then you talk about what you want to talk about. And that's a dimension that we also try to bring in here, but sometimes forget a little bit. Fortunately, like Lucas and I, like we know a little bit better how our lives are going to some extent, like we're in like even if we don't talk in person, like we're in the same family WhatsApp chats and lots of pictures get shared there. And I
Yeah.
know I was with my youngest brother recently in France, so he must have had a good time there. So even though I didn't ask you about that at the start of this conversation, I kind of know, like so there's something
Yeah.
nice about that. Whereas I would have also known if something terrible has happened recently. Um, and that's the space that estuary allows. That I think the space also allows, but it doesn't capitalize on in the first place. But it capitalizes on it far more than like other what do you call it, like dialogues on YouTube that are
Yeah.
happening. So it's still really fascinating. So I'd say
Yeah.
go to Paul van der Klei's video channel to
Yeah. Yeah.
that video. But sorry, do continue. Long interruption.
No, it's all good. Also, my thoughts are developing as I speak, so you're
Mhm,
helping me think. A lot of this little corner conversations are very intellectual, possibly because of the nature of the conversation and let's say the format where we speak for an hour and a half. I think it's conducive to a
mhm,
deeper conversation and often one that goes into
mhm.
those deeper topics.
And I also think it's just like the majority of us are men, and I don't even mean that in the sense like I mean like it's obvious like from the literature it's obvious that on average men and women are equally intelligent. So I'm not even making a point about that. I'm just saying men can get really geeky about stuff. Like they
Yeah,
can fixate on certain subject matters and even like drift off to some extent. And like to those people that don't like gender essentialism, I'm not even making a point there. I'm just saying, even if it's like a social construct, that's the way that it often manifests itself in the world, like, so yeah, that's just my point.
man, I love you. So, so yeah, but it's true, and like you're never going to get a male and female equality in this space because it's idea dominated in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's going to change. And at least it might change a bit, but it's not going to get to that level. And so I think you should have your own community in person. And if you don't have that, it's something to work toward. And this little corner can help you get there because it can
Mm-hmm.
it can train you in that way, and it can teach you how to apply this implicit ethic that we often speak about,
Mm-hmm.
of really truly listening and taking care into conversations. And so this is in many ways a good thing, but I think for a lot of people, it's too big of a thing or it's too important to them, if you know what I mean. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for myself, I feel that I'm kind of sometimes using it as an excuse for not going to church. It's like, well, I'm speaking about Christ or I'm
Yeah, yeah.
thinking about it all the time and having these intellectual conversations. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not participating correctly.
It's also
Uh,
like, why, if you're thinking about God, why talk to God? It's like, you're already doing one dimension. So
yeah.
that's, yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, so
interesting.
there's dangers and pitfalls to it, but I think for now, for a lot of people, it's so needed
Mm-hmm.
that I will not describe it as a bad thing. Um, I'm constantly questioning it for myself. Even the podcast, I don't know, but right now it seems to be a good thing, not for me, but also for the people around me, and that can change. The same with this little corner, it can change very quickly, given the circumstances of the world and given how people approach it. So it's a living organism, and we need to care for it and treat it well, and we need to be wise with it. So that means a constant evaluation and questioning also. Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm not sure, but I
So, okay, sorry, you froze for a little bit. I'm not sure if it's on my end or on your end. Um, and now I can't hear you anymore. I'm gonna keep talking and you try to fix it in the meantime.
I think I'm good now.
Okay, I think you're back. Yeah, I hear you.
Good. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, I think one thing that I'm thinking about that relates to this, well, I had a couple of thoughts when you were talking. So one thing that I think it works really well is it's the content and the form of the conversation overlap. And that's like, let's say the, the implicit ethic, right? It's like that there's something about, let's say if you discuss the true, the good, and the beautiful, then it's not about my truth or my aesthetic taste and what do you call it, like what I think everyone should do. It's like no, it's not. You're trying to relate to something that is both you and the world. It's like it's about that relationship between you and the world. So there's already like in the content of everything we discuss is we're trying to get out of our egocentrism and move towards the world. And then combine that with the form of the conversation, which is like, hey, it's nice that you can talk every now and then, and you're able to do that. And actually, it's fantastic because you're going to be listened to. So people actually care about you in some ways. But at the same time, you're going to care about them and you're going to listen to them. And so, like, and because they overlap so well, it actually works amazingly well. And the main problem with that is obviously that it can be, well, there's no problem with that per se. There's a problem when we don't realize that then that should point to the fact that, oh, actually, so if it shouldn't just be about me, it also shouldn't be just about my own desire to just remain, focused within this kind of sphere. Like it should, and I think that's really why people like you so much, is like you give lots of, you're a super young guy, and at the same time, you give lots of examples of how you're already trying to, let's say, manifest this in the world and also do it on your channel at the same time. And that's, I think, what people are looking for. And that's also why like Paul often brings up Chris Williamson. He kind of says like that's like old YouTube. He really likes Chris Williamson, but at the same time he's like that's old YouTube. And he actually said on the live stream like I should actually maybe ask Chris to come on the podcast and just talk about his story like a little bit more as opposed to you know. And then also some people commented that they actually dislike that he he rarely gets religious folks on for the conversation or something like that. Like he rarely gets people that talk about the meaning of life or philosophy, and mostly gets like scientists and social scientists.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have another question for you that relates to everything I've just said.
But
So
can I quickly say something about Chris?
yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Keep
So,
going.
I recently watched a small part of the Q&A where he quickly spoke about religion.
Your
And
mic is off, by the way, which is fine. I can hear you well, but your mic is not currently connected, it seems. Yeah.
you can hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you, but it seems to go through your laptop audio and not.
Please speak yourself. Speak yourself. I'll fix it. Speak yourself.
Okay.
Ask the question.
Okay. Um, yeah, no, I think one thing that I was going to say was that I very often have friends, like most of the friends I have, like I befriended during college, and during college was really a time of my life when I was still afloat on, let's say, the remainder of the positive aspects I still had from my religious upbringing in terms of the meaning, but also was starting to see, let's say, the edges of that and see like, oh, wait, but now what does this mean? Like now that because I didn't really identify as a believer at all anymore. I didn't go to church, and yeah, I'm sad to say I still don't go to church in some ways. And I think the reason why I'm sad to say that is because precisely what we're talking about. Like I think that participation has to come on. I mean, I'm gonna go to something like that this week, so I'm working on it. Let me put it that way. But um, yeah, there's obviously struggles also, with me trying to
Mhm.
reconcile my philosophical attitude with something like going to church, which still seems very foreign to me, even though at the same time it's very familiar. But my point is, when that was happening, I befriended most of my friends, and most of them are secular too. And those that stuck around have really gotten to know me and have seen my own journey through like finding meaning in my life and how I've dealt with that. Um, and I think they've had their own ways of dealing with that, and I've allowed myself to be inspired by how they deal with that, and they've, I think, been inspired with how I deal with that. And with some of them, I, for instance, have attempted to do like some Verveki, dialectic into dialogos type exercises, practices, which actually went really well. And with others, I've obviously done like something like estuary. My point being is that many of those people find it very, like, they are kind of interested in it, but we've only done it like online, and it's very difficult to like do that routinely. Whenever we do it routinely, it's like great, and then we don't do it for a while, and then we kind of like drift off, and then you could tell. I mean, in my opinion, it's strongly correlated with, oh yeah, I forget about everything, and then oh yeah, we should probably do this again, and then when they forget, actually, well, it's interesting to me because it's often a point where they, and myself included, we don't reflect, like we reflect a little bit less. I think I might reflect a little bit more because I have a partner and because I have you guys, like that, um, that helps me to reflect. But my point being is that many of my friends actually see therapists, for instance. They're not happy. They're often not happy, and and they see there's something here, but at the same time they also don't want to make the jump to a religion or something like that. And many of them also aren't that intellectually interested in some of these arguments. Like it's not about that for them. And at the same time, they've shown some affinity or interest in some of these practices that I've introduced, but also limited. So they don't want it like more all the time. They want to do it every now and then. So, okay, this is a really long question, but my question is coming at, like, you obviously have more friends in your friend group. Um, you might be you might have what they call it, like a selection bias, because you mostly hang out with gym bros, and gym bros in general are quite healthy. It's like just going to the gym is very strongly correlated with mental health. But that's to say, Lasse is a really, like, what they call it, like a strong, energetic friend of mine. And I really, really, really like the guy, but he also really struggled with it with his mental health. So I'm curious, like, do you ever? Okay, I always run into kind of making my way around, well, maybe you should be joining some type of community, and and maybe some community that is about shared values, and essentially I'm describing something like a church that, again, I don't go to myself, but I kind of mean, like, it shouldn't just be about people you like, that you go bowling with, which is also
Yeah.
really good. Actually, something that you find important, and that's, I usually end up with volunteer work, but I kind of mean the church. But I also, so what do you ever run into a situation where you feel like you have to advise your friends to maybe try out something like that?
Yeah.
And if so, how do you deal with that, especially if, for instance, they're also not Christian?
So does my microphone work?
Yeah, yeah, it works.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It was the
Maybe
cable
feel,
was
feel
loose.
feel free to first start on the previous point with Chris Williamson.
Well, that was a small point that I saw him responding to a religious question, and he said
Mm,
he'd gone to like a church service in Austin,
mm.
and he responded so quickly to it. He's like, "Yeah, it was a pretty cool experience," and it's like okay, kind of like missing the point of why you went,
Yeah,
like he evaluated it for himself, and like it's when people say like, "Oh yeah, I see the appeal, but not for me,"
yeah.
stuff like that, and it's like it's not the way to evaluate that experience. But I'd
Well,
love to
that's
see.
really interesting. Like, usually if you go to church, like, people in the church are like, "Hey, who are you? Where are you from?" Which actually can be like super intimidating. That's often why I don't like going to church. But I understand why, because they're like, "Oh, new young people, like, please, yes, please join us. Like, we
Young
need you
people.
here." And then the young people go home and they're like, "Not sure if I liked it." As opposed to being like, "Oh, whoa, actually, they kind of made almost like a moral demand on me to go." But you don't realize that because they're
Yeah,
so nice that it's like that you just kind of, yeah, you kind of like be like, I'm not sure, maybe I'll go, maybe not. But anyways, yeah.
yeah. Where's our beautiful friend Diego from the Dutch estuary? Relate a
Yeah.
beautiful twice.
Hmm.
Story where he went to a church and people just offered to help him move at the time, and like he
Yeah.
was so appalled by the absolute generosity and care that they took for him, even though they didn't even know him. That's I think what left such a powerful mark on him. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's just a little tangent. Um, Back
Hmm.
to your question, I try to meet people where they're at. So I try to people come to me with problems, and they do a lot actually. Funnily enough, or sadly enough, I
Hmm.
try to meet them where they're at, and there's different advice for different people. Um, I know people that are Christian, actually quite a number of them, which is interesting. And usually they're not Dutch, but for obvious reasons. And sometimes I advise them to do that. Not a lot of them because I don't know a lot of people that are. But if they are, oftentimes we speak about that and we speak about finding a church here and this and that. with other people, I think they're not even close to doing that. So you have to get them to a different place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what may be within reach for them is to reconnect with their family, you know, is to spend less time partying or sleeping around. I know a lot of people, of course, my age group, they're not in relationships. They're not even close to anything commitment related. So
Mm-hmm.
usually I don't have to wrestle with the explanation of something like a church because it's not something they're ready for at all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What you do say is true, is that I do know a lot of people that are already quite balanced, I would say. I also do know a lot of religious people, to be honest, like especially the place I play football at, almost everyone is religious.
Mm.
You know, but there's a lot of Muslims and there's Christians, and but that's a different age group as well. Like it's a lot of guys in their 30s and 40s. And
And that was actually going to be my question. Like, what do you say? Who would you say your oldest friend is? I'm curious.
um
How old would you say your oldest friend is? You don't have to name him.
well, it's hard to say what is a friend. Like, for example, people at football I see every week, but I don't hang out with a lot of
Yeah,
them
yeah, yeah.
outside of
Okay.
football. So you'd
So
have to hang out.
everyone from Lucas football team who's watching, he does consider you a friend, but we're not talking about you right now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know, like I would consider some guys my friends that are in their 30s. I think that's about the oldest, like maybe 33 or something.
Hmm. And
35.
let's say amongst your best friends, I'm just curious, like among some of your really close friends, like
Like
how
I would
old
say
is?
my best friend is my age.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's like his father's Catholic, and he's done something with that, and I've spoken to him about God, and yeah, he's not in a place yet to go to church, I think. I don't
No,
know if you.
no, that was kind of like I guess my point is like that many of my friends my age, right there, and my age and a little bit older, is those who are still like searching, like they're like, wait, people are getting married now and people are having children and what am I doing with my life? And wait, people are settling down and some people have a purpose, but I don't. And it's kind of like it's at that time where you kind of see that, oh, if they're still single, for instance, um, like, oh shit, how am I gonna deal with that? Because I can't just, continue this routine that I have right now. And at the same time, other people who are in relationships, but relationships that they struggle with a lot is also like, oh, I kind of really do want to settle down. I want like I have a lot of problems in my relationships, but I do kind of want to agree on some fundamental things, and that makes it very difficult. So it's also like I feel so maybe there is also a difference in us advising our friends in some ways that's why I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should try to find or you should hope, like for instance, if you're single, so some of my friends are single, but nonetheless, yeah, I don't know, nonetheless they obviously would
Yeah,
like a relationship. I'm kind of like you should hope to meet your friend like at volunteering work, something like that, or a church, but something like that, like something where it's not a colleague at work, it's not, and I'm not, by the way, against any of that. Like, you've related your own story and it seemed to have worked out perfectly for you, which is, by the way, not a colleague at work. It's very important. But and also colleagues at work can work very well, so I'm not saying that's necessarily a problem. I'm just saying, like, if you don't, if you for instance, you're single, but you're only working and you're not really doing anything besides, then obviously it's going to be difficult to run into your partner at some point. It's like, well, where are you actually relating to stuff that's important to you long term? And that might actually be where you run into people with similar values in some ways. Like, oh yes, wow, you also care about that a lot. Like, oh, and then real love can emerge. And like that can also happen different ways. But as you get older, you realize more and more, like, oh, actually, maybe I should be looking a little bit like in a more sophisticated way and not just hope at some point, on my
yeah,
path, yeah, my partner will come. How do you look
yeah.
at? Yeah.
And for me, that was very directed. Also, like, it was a very directed search. And I advise, like, when people ask me about advice about things,
Mm-hmm.
now more and more it's relationships because they see that I'm, getting married and stuff. So then it's a bit more proof of work,
Oh
and
yeah.
so I never hesitate. I always advise people like aim
Mhm.
if you're getting into a relationship, aim for marriage, like aim for the highest.
Yeah.
Like that's the one thing I'm very firm about. People know that about me if they've ever spoken to me about that. It's like I never endorse just like seeing where it goes or sleeping around. And I've seen so many people in my direct environment
Yeah.
hurt by it. And yeah, where do you look? That's always like a big question of like where on earth could I find a person like this?
Yeah.
And I mean, for some people that are in my age group, it also won't be church because those people will be too far from who they are.
Mhm.
Um,
Exactly.
but I
Yeah.
do say find a place that's not the bar,
Yeah.
like don't go to the bar. Like you're never gonna find your wife at a bar.
Yeah, or
So
even like, but I also know like, so for instance, friends of mine, and obviously like for obvious reasons, I won't name them, but they like they will meet potential partners, mates at parties, and not necessarily at the bar. So it's not like random individuals. So it
yeah,
is kind of like people who are more in their bubble because they go to
some
the
some
same party.
connection.
But at the same time, it's always like kind of fun and done, like, oh, you have some drinks, and then and then the spark happens, and then you see, well, let's see where this goes, and then often it doesn't really go anywhere, and that's really like there's obviously something, yeah, extremely unfortunate about that, but that's also, yeah, I don't know. That's what they always remark, right, about our generation, is that we we have more sexual liberation than ever, and you can find everything related to sex very easily on the internet and all that, but at the same time there's less sex than ever before.
Yeah,
Kind of interesting because you'd think like, oh, now we're no longer bound by a monogamous marriage, but it results in unless in some way, not by the way that sex the ultimate marker. It's a marker,
yeah,
a marker of many markers. Yeah.
yeah. It's honestly quite tragic. I mean, it's what you get when you go for the quickest gratification,
Hmm.
and that's our society. A lot of it is it's the instant gratification, and so
Hmm.
something close to that would be seen as more free. And that relates to the question we've handled before about freedom. It's like you don't really want to be so free that your first impulse is what you do.
Yeah.
It's like when you celebrate your desires, it's not something to be necessarily proud of.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
yeah,
No, and that's really like, so it's always kind of funny because like I'm now teaching on Kant again, and Kant is really, I think, one of the first Enlightenment folks, or late Enlightenment folks, that really, and you can kind of square Rousseau under this too, that is like, okay, I'm gonna bring back the notion of freedom, that is like, it's not freedom to do whatever I want, it's freedom to, in his way, to obey the law that I give myself, and it's not that I give myself, so it's not like, oh, I choose to do this. It's like, well, no, you see it as a universal law that applies to everyone. It's kind of like, no one should actually lie, so therefore I shouldn't do it, and I'm able to obey that, and that's really what's important for someone like Kant, and that's freedom, is actually to be like, oh, can you obey that? Well, then you're not bound by your physical desires, and that's really important by Kant. That's why he's for a categorical imperative, so an imperative that applies to everyone categorically, and not the hypothetical imperative where it's like, well, if you want to get this, then you should do this. Like, that's a hypothesis, it's like, no, no,
mhm,
just categorically you should be acting this way.
yeah,
And it's kind of interesting because like students, especially like obviously like most of my students, like they're, especially for this course, they're around 18 years old. So some of them are a bit older, but they're like, that doesn't really sound like freedom. That sounds like, you have to follow the law. That I don't associate that with freedom at all. It's like, and I totally understand why that's difficult to square. But at the same time, especially if you're like a little bit older and you see the way you can get into downfalls, and you see people of your age get into downfalls of any sort of addiction. So it's like, for me, especially, like, for me, it's like my phone and my laptop are like big problems in like how I'm addicted. I'm like, that's not freedom. I'm free to be like, you could say that I'm like free to be on this laptop and like be on my phone all the time, but it's really not something that I'm experiencing freedom in. I'd experience far more freedom if I was able to like get rid of that, but
yeah,
in some ways I'm not, at the moment. So yeah.
yeah. It usually takes getting out of the school system and being on your own for a bit to realize that you should you shouldn't be that free. Like I barely know anyone that thrives when they don't have work. Like
Yeah.
it takes a very rare
And
individual to do
I
that.
know, I know, and that's also kind of why I'm like, there's still this kind of relativism in our culture where it's like, oh, well, you should do whatever you want. And I'm like, I mean, obviously, it's something I don't want to be the one who tells you what you should do because that would be tyrannical. Like that,
Yes.
I'm not gonna be
That's
that
the
guy.
response. That what it's in response towards. So I understand
Mhm.
it. But
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to be ruled by other people, but you also don't just want to be ruled by whatever you want, you know? And sometimes not even by whatever you think is best. It's like, well, maybe you should have a conversation about someone with many different people about what you think is best, and then change that opinion, change that opinion, and maybe
yeah.
see where it fits with what other people think, and then maybe be open to objections from, especially if many of the people are from the same bubble, so they don't really hear a lot of different perspectives, and then maybe you can do what's best in sort of that general sense. But
Mm.
it's so tricky, and that's kind of like I do struggle with that. I'm I'm really in favor of. It sounds very strange, but I totally love it when friends confront me, and not because I'm like, oh, that's great. Like I'm actually like it does piss me off for a moment, but then we have a conversation about it, and then I'm like kind of happy you said that because now we had a really important conversation, and now you were able to reflect on maybe the degree to which your what do you call it your judgment of me was maybe somewhat limited, maybe it wasn't a full, but at the same time I was totally able to now see to what extent it was fully valid, and I was like, oh yeah, actually you're right, like maybe I shouldn't have thought about that, like I should have been thinking about that more. And that was really helpful for me to really find that in friends. But I noticed that therefore, because I appreciate other people doing that to me, I have a tendency to sometimes do that to other people, and sometimes also give them somewhat unsolicited advice. And I think I've now struck a balance where I'm better at it than I used to be. Um, but that is always difficult because then people respond like, what's your deal? Like, just let me do whatever I want. I'm like, yeah, in the end, you can do whatever you want, but I do want to talk about it. Like, I'm not gonna, just pretend like I think it's okay. I'm gonna tell you what my opinion, and then you can still do whatever you want. But I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you that I don't think it's wise. Whatever you're doing, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
The-
I've
the-
actually the same, very similar
Okay,
conversations all the time.
because I was curious because like I think of myself somewhat as I can be a little bit polemical, like I can kind of like search for the conflict in order for, like what do you call it? Like that Peter says, like, it's like conflict now is later conflict avoided or something
Yes.
like that. So in that sense of conflict, I can be all for it. But I don't think of you as a particularly polemical person, which is also I think why people like you so much. It's like you're a very intriguing interviewer. You just listen. So how do you do that? Like, do you ever get polemical with people?
Yes.
No.
I love them. And if I know them well enough to know that they won't latch out if I say something. Um, so yeah, like it depends if I know, like some friends of mine play video games and be like, dog, it's not good. There's no way good. Like I'll just tell
Yeah.
you, maybe you're interacting with your friends over the video game, but mostly it's just not a good thing in your life. Like
Mhm.
I'll just be very honest,
Mhm.
or with alcohol if it's excessive alcohol use, or if it's But it's rarely confrontational. It's more inquisitive, um, and it's never judgment. Let's say, so I'll
Mhm.
be like, "Do you think this is a good thing in your life, or is this bringing you a lot of joy?" And sometimes, generally, the video game brings so much joy, and they have a perfect process where they do it 30 minutes, no max, no more, and But a lot of times, when whatever it may be, an addiction or a behavior, I inquire about it, they very quickly realize and admit to themselves, like, yeah, I know it's not a good thing, and I want to move toward this. And I always admit to them, like, I am terrible with this. Like, you don't want to know how addictive my personality is. That's why I banished everything from my life. Like
Mhm.
yesterday, Jules, my fiance, she asked me for a sip of fruit juice, and I couldn't stop thinking about the fruit juice the whole day. Like I asked
Oh,
her,
so like she offered you a sip of fruit juice.
yeah, I had a sip, and
Oh,
then the
oh
whole
yeah,
rest of the day I was thinking about that fruit juice. Like I wanted more.
yeah.
So like I think what helps why people don't feel that I'm polemical is that I always admit my own faults, which I have a lot of, and
Mhm.
I've because I'm a bit of an edge case in terms of how extreme my personality is. I think um, I'm always like, yeah, but I'm worse than you, you know, I'm worse than you. But I found a way because for me, it's just saying no completely, like saying no to alcohol completely, saying no to certain foods completely.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and committing to a relationship completely, giving that my whole heart and everything. And
Mm.
so I'm also very agreeable, so I'm extremely conflict avoidant. The last time I've had like a big conflict was maybe a year and a half ago with a friend of mine about communism, because that can really set me off. Like sometimes I hear something that someone says this and it's so outrageous, and it's like I just then I could that could set me off. Like then we end up screaming to each other in the gym, and then we
Mm.
had a good talk about it afterward. It's one of my best friends, and
Mm.
so but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, but look, I would say like my bigger conflicts are usually about people themselves, like about myself, about them, it's like I will I'll call my friends out if I think they're not being good friends. And that really gets on people's nerves. Like that they're like, what? Like you're judging me as a person. And I totally understand. Like it's kind of like a cruel thing to do, and at the same time, it's like it's kind of funny because like I'm something like a little bit aware that I'm like polemical and that and I always tell my friends like you should do the same to me. Like if you ever experience that from me, tell me about that. Like please. Um and I've sometimes had them admit that they in the end do appreciate that I've started,
Mhm.
the discussion on it, even though in the middle of it they hate it and they're like, how can you say this? Like and some of them like, it does get a little bit intense. But then it's kind of like then I kind of feel, for instance, like especially with some of my long-term relationships, like with friends. I don't have multiple long-term relationships with women. Um, but like that I talk to them and then I give them some like, oh, maybe we can call next week, and then it's like, oh, it's actually busy. Oh, maybe we can call next week, and then for instance, and then they might have forgotten about another thing, and then I'm just like at some point, okay, it's like three strikes and you're out. Like we've really, at some point you've just kind of forgot about everything, and then I call them out on it. But then for them it comes so out of the blue because have just been so busy, just like I was, for instance, the last few months. Is that like they haven't really thought about it, so for them it's just like, what? What is this message? And I'm like, that's the point. But the point of the message is to say you haven't been thinking about it. It's not so much to be like, oh,
Yeah.
I've been this angry friend who's been like, I'm not gonna talk to Aaron. It's like, no, but you haven't been mindful, and that's kind of like, so those are really where the main conflicts come from. I think intellectually, yeah, I don't know. I it depends. Sometimes it kind of get a little bit tense, but I also, yeah, I don't know.
But I'll speak personally though, because Aaron has been so great in my life, so polemical. And so I think you say you've gotten better at it now, but you're already great at it years ago. You can trace back all the messages on Telegram, and like he's well, that you would like try to steer me into the right direction and things. So
Oh, okay.
so first, like the time of my say my gap year
Mm,
and me saying bye to all my friends, like just
mm,
starting my whole life anew and saying no to everything, basically complete detox, like much more extreme than it is now. And you just like always talking with me about it, or
mm,
church always talking to me about it, or um like the way I used to eat, or
mm,
anything it may be, you would always, and you made it very clear that it came from a place of love,
mm,
always try to like help me steer into the right direction, and that never felt like bad or something.
mm.
But I was also very receptive to it, because I was just like, how can I be
Yeah,
the best person? Like, how can I be the best person? You would always feed me things to work,
yeah.
and then, but you always met me where I was at as well.
Mm.
Like, so I think,
Like I didn't try to suggest something that clearly was never gonna be something you would be interested in.
yeah,
That's kind of, yeah, maybe that's what you mean, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
You helped me
appreciate.
nudge. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I ever did that like consciously, but I'm obviously happy that it had that effect. And also like what you say, like there's something about especially the way, like I think you still are, but especially then because you were in a very formative time of your life, and you still are, but like extremely like then, because kind of like because you started from a clean sheet, right? Like what you said, like you kind of gotta like you you restarted your diet, you restarted your workout routine, you restarted your friendship possibilities, like all of those things. You like that you were just like you were open to like, okay, I'm in some ways you were empty. It's like, you
Hmm.
cleaned your room, but how are you going to make it beautiful? It's kind of like, okay, so you were really, and that's like, I think one of the main things that I'm really happy with that you took my advice on is playing music. Actually, that's like something that I'm like, oh my, I'm so happy you did that, because like that really gives me and like so many other things too, obviously, but but I'm yeah, I don't know, it brings me so much joy to see you play the piano. And like, I'm not sure if you still often get to do that, but like just the fact that you had that like as a part of your
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't do it very often. I have a keyboard next to me, but I just love a piano. And Jules knows that eventually I'd love to have a piano in the
Yeah.
house, but
Hmm.
it was a very good relationship I had to that because it was also the masculine before the feminine. So my first year and a half on that piano was just hardcore discipline. It was exactly what I needed at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then near the end there, it was just pure creation,
yeah.
pure improvisation, pure,
It's also like what is it like? You need to learn the rules so you know when you can break them. It's kind of like, which I
yeah,
think is just a great way of thinking about it. It's like it's
yeah,
not the other way around. You don't start with breaking the rules and then you understand why they're there. It's like no, you start with understanding the rules.
yeah. That's why it's good to learn an instrument, I think, because it
Yeah.
teaches you about reality. By the way, we're running out of time. I hate
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
I do want to discuss the two things that are coming up. First, in the very recent future, you're going to recent future,
Near future.
near future, you're going
Yeah.
to speak with Brendan Graham
Yeah. Brandon
Dempsey.
Graham Dempsey. Yeah.
I keep getting his name wrong. Brendan Graham Dempsey. I keep thinking it's
Yeah.
Ben. And my father.
Yes.
Tell
Yes.
us about that.
Well, so I was thinking, like, you know, okay, so related to this, first of all, our dad, and we're going to be very nepotistic about this, but like he's kind of been on the sidelines, obviously, makes sense. He has a life, we don't have a life. I'm saying like he has 6 children, we don't have any children, for instance. That's just one thing that makes his life very incredibly busy. And obviously the fact that he's not from the internet generation, so he finds it very difficult to integrate this with his life that he was already leading. But he's been kind of like on and off. You can look for some of his conversations with Paul. I think there's two where I also featured in. It's kind of like you kind of joined the scene after that, which is really funny. And now he is going to be speaking at the Breakwater Festival, which I don't think it's a secret to say is going to be hosted at our house. Like it's well, not our house, or like not my house, not your house, but like our parental home, which is really nice. Like there's some space there for camping, and yeah, I'm really sad because I think you cannot be there, and I like Madelief and we agreed to babysit that weekend, like way before that happened, and we're yeah, so seeing if I can combine that, but yeah, we'll have to see. But my point is, nonetheless, so I do really hope to go, if not for the whole thing, then for a portion of it. He's going to be speaking at that, and he was also, I think, was again like branded as like father of TLC brothers Aron and Lucas, which is really funny. With also Charlie Brown or Stephan Solomon, that he has been talking to us a lot. Our other father, let's say, no, our brother maybe is more appropriate. But he's also going to be speaking at that, and then also Sarah Folmer, who I don't think you've met before, but I've been organizing stuff with her in the past, and she's also really great. Um, and like one thing that's interesting about him, obviously, like he has been a main influence on us, and we've been drawn to this. So like there's a connection there. Like I think he and we are still figuring out what exactly that connection is. Like what is the thing that he inspired us with that eventually drew us to this type of subculture. And at the same time, there's something in his own research, like as you've mentioned before, like he's a theologian and he specializes in, let's say, the historical realities very often of the Gospels, so of the life of Jesus. Um, and that's really something that unfortunately he arrived in the discipline quite late, which is why he was never able to really like capitalize on that as much as he would have liked to. But nonetheless, I think he has good reasons. And again, like obviously going to be biased, but I think he does have good reason to think that in some of these things that he's talking about, he may be one of the leading experts, and therefore he should be taken seriously. And he doesn't claim this, but or at least he doesn't claim that publicly. But you get that sense from talking to him that he really knows what he's talking about. So in some sense, when I hear someone like Brendan Graham Dempsey talking about, I think it's very important that if we're gonna see if this is meta modern or not, to really consider to what extent it disregards the modern approach, or to what extent it's using the modern approach to go through the modern approach towards the meta modern. And it's like it seems like it wants to bypass that, and that's really his point. And I'm like, okay, then I listen to what my dad is talking about, and he very much used the historical critical approach that Brendan Graham Dempsey is talking about all the time in his work. And for our dad, that has not led him to the conclusions that it has led Brendan Graham Dempsey to. So that might be worth talking about, because let's say, so he talks about, sorry to go on a tangent, but he talks about meta-modern Christianity. And so some people have responded, first of all, that was often like the first wave of response was like, well, this doesn't sound that Christian to me, or it doesn't sound that, or meta-modern spirituality or religions. Like, it doesn't sound like religion to me. It doesn't sound like spirituality to me. It sounds like maybe an interesting intellectual topic, but it seems like you're missing out all the existential dimensions and communal dimensions that make it a religion, that actually make it Christianity, for instance, in this particular case. So people were like, meta-modern Christianity? Well, where's the Christian? Where's the Christianity? And then he had a conversation on Grill Country with Nate Heil. And Nate asked, like, hey, where's the meta? He was like, okay, it actually sounds like you're just presenting like modern Christianity, and that's kind of like what you want to get to. Like, it doesn't really sound all that meta to me. And I think, therefore, the one remaining thing that is left to talk about is, where's the modern? Like, actually, people think that he gets through to the modern, which in some important ways he does. But at the same time, that's also not his expertise. So you can also talk about the modern a little bit more and be like, okay, what if we actually critically look at the modern, which obviously is something that our father has done a lot. Like he's been looking at the historical critical approach, and does it actually lead to the same conclusions that he has led to? And that will be an interesting talk, and also to kind of see if he thinks to what extent and why or why not our dad could be a candidate for what he's looking for. Because on the one hand, like he embraced the historical critical approach, but not to the way that it's like, oh, so it's all, so it's not the same as it's not the exact same as it is in the Bible. So now, I either have to ignore it, or I have to, no longer be a Christian. And it's like, well, it hasn't led him to that. So maybe talk to him about that. So I think there's lots to talk about there,
Do
Yeah.
you have that Tuesday on his channel?
I think we're gonna discuss still on whose channel it's gonna be. I hope he wants to publish it on his channel. I think there'll be,
You'll discuss it. You'll publish it yourself.
well, one of the two. Just and probably it will probably be Wednesday, because we're talking like Tuesday
Yeah.
night late, pretty late in the evening
Okay.
at least.
Well,
And
I'll
maybe
try
one
to.
addendum, obviously, that your viewers will probably already know is like, I'm a Nietzsche enthusiast. And the fact that I'm a Nietzsche enthusiast also means that I can be a potential bridge, right? Like, I see the shortcomings of Christianity and why we need to deal with the death of God and what that actually means. So I feel that existentially what the problematic is that he raised, and at the same time, it also hasn't led me to some of the same conclusions that he's at. So yeah, I think it could just be an interesting talk, because maybe there's something that we're missing. Like, what are our blind spots that he is able to fill in on?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, and the Breakwater Festival. I think
Mm.
more information on that will follow, but I mean, is there something to put in the description yet or no? I mean, you sent me the
Yeah, I
posting,
do
but
think so. I'll send it to you. If not, I'll at least send the save the date in the
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and that's, I think, was the 5th. No, it was what was it again? Do you remember? It was the 5th of the
Fifth to the
5th of
7th, I think.
July. Yeah, of
I
July
think.
23, and they will be in, let's say, the center of the Netherlands, so in Leusden, a small little town near Utrecht and Amersfoort.
Yeah.
So worth looking into, and with camping facilities. So it should be nice. Should be really good. Yeah.
That's the end of our time today, sadly.
Yeah.
I will say Stefan couldn't make it today, but hopefully we'll do another one of these soon with him.
Yeah. And also ask him what he's going to be talking about during
Yeah,
the festival. Should
yeah,
be
we'll do. I'll see
interesting.
you soon, I think. Well, what month is it? May?
Well, are you going to be there for Mother's Day next week?
Oh, doubtfully. No, I also have a talk, I think, with
Ah,
Andrea. So
okay.
I don't
Thank you.
think so.
Okay.
But I'll be in LEUSDEN and we'll connect and it'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
And like
Okay.
you said, we're always texting and like
Yeah,
we're kind
exactly.
of in each other's lives the whole time, but
Yeah.
not really.
Yeah. Which is great. Which is great.
All
Okay.
right, Evan. Have a good
Well,
rest of your day. Say hi to Madleaf.
wonderful to talk to you, bro.
Oh no,
Okay. Oh no.
I'm
Oh no.
dropped. Okay, I'm ending
I
it.
will do. Say hi to Jules, obviously.
Will do. See you.
All right. See you, brother.